And it's obviously, we thank Gail for being so much foresight in how she does the program. So you heard your survey, and now we're going to have a whole session on symptoms, because clearly it's incredibly important. I mean, how you function and how you feel, not just your liver blood tests. So I'm going to moderate. We've got 3 speakers. I feel a little bit, East Coast, because it's very, very West Coast. But we're going to have just talks on fatigue, brain fog, and itch. And it's my pleasure really to ask Professor Tandon to come first. Professor Tandon's from Edmonton, professor of hepatology, and has really championed, I would say, implementation science in the real world for people living with liver disease, cirrhosis, and PBC, and has really also championed, real world interventions to actually make people feel better. So Puneeta, we're really pleased that you're going to start off by talking about fatigue.
Thank you, Gideon, and thank you everyone for being here. I'm so excited to have the opportunity to present. So yes, my topic, not your ordinary tired, understanding PBC fatigue. No relevant disclosures. So let's start with what is fatigue and how is it defined? All of us in this room, PBC or not, have suffered from fatigue at some point, and this is non-pathological fatigue. So it's going for a big run, doing a workout, having a really exhausting day, feeling tired after you've done effort, but that gets better once you rest. In addition to that, PBC and other conditions can suffer from pathological fatigue. So that's exhaustion that doesn't necessarily go away with rest. How common is fatigue in PBC? And we've heard from Emily in the survey, lots of members expressing fatigue, at least 50%, and I would say in some studies up to 80% of people with PBC experiencing significant fatigue. More common in those diagnosed at a younger age. This has already been pointed out, but it's unrelated to the severity of liver disease. So you can have fatigue even at the earlier stages of PBC. It's not necessarily correlated to your liver tests. When you get more advanced scar tissue in the liver, if that happens with cirrhosis, then that in itself can bring some additional fatigue. So that's one caveat to that, but otherwise not correlated. And fatigue does improve with transplant, but often not quite back to normal levels as well. So why is it important? Emily's also pointed this out really nicely in the survey, but it's the most important driver across many studies of reduced quality of life. And we've had the chance to speak to multiple patients with PBC over the last number of years that we've been doing research in this space. And similar quotes come out around that invisibility. Listen, I look okay, but, I'm exhausted. And that invisible condition that comes out. This participant of ours said fatigue has always been her biggest symptom. Going grocery shopping, getting home, literally needing to sit in the car and not having the energy to get out, find the stairs to the house. Another participant saying, oh gosh, am I just going to have another day of fatigue again? And another one, I don't have a lot of energy reserves, wearing out before the day wears out, that idea of kind of the plug being pulled or the battery going low, that's a very common analogy. Now, if we classify fatigue, there's 2 kind of big categories. One is central fatigue. The other one is peripheral fatigue. Dr. Swain, you're going to hear from next. He's going to talk a lot about brain fog, and there's overlap between all of these things. But central fatigue, essentially, you can think of it like memory troubles, disordered sleep, lack of motivation, just don't feel you got the get up and go to do stuff. Peripheral fatigue is more in the muscle level, less endurance in your muscles, find it more difficult to actually do physical exercise, and you have a slower recovery time, okay? And these often will occur together. This is a more complicated looking slide, but I'm going to walk you through it, and I think Dr. Swain will probably cover it a bit too. It's from one of his beautiful reviews that they published last year. So this just speaks to the point that there is stuff going on to explain this. I don't know that we 100% understand why fatigue happens fully, but there is altered communication between the brain, between the body and the brain, rather. And largely that stems from inflammation, whether it's liver inflammation or inflammation elsewhere, that's sending signals up by the nerve root. So the vagus nerve, you're going to hear me talk about in some of our mind-body research that we've done. The vagus nerve can connect the liver to the brain, and those signals can then impact motivation and energy. You can have stuff happening through the blood pathway, so blood communication with substances called cytokines or inflammatory markers, and that can also change how the brain processes things and again makes you perceive more fatigue. Immune cell mediated, we've heard a lot about autoimmunity, but inflammation can activate immune cells in a way that can change motivation and reward pathways as well. And then speakers have also touched on the gut microbiome, so that's another trillions of bacteria in our gut that are sending signals up to our brain as well and having communication there. So imbalance there in other conditions has also altered the feel-good chemicals like serotonin and dopamine that again contribute to those feelings of fatigue. So lots going on that can explain this. Again, Dr. Swain will probably touch on this. I will just briefly speak to the fact that there's also structural changes in the brain. And this was, again, a study of his looking at changes in one area of the brain called the thalamus, which is known as the central relay station, carrying information from the body to the brain. If that area changes, less able to process those signals and contribution to feeling a bit more mentally fatigued. What about the muscle studies? And this one was one I pulled out from 2008. So this is, they took patients with PBC and they took control patients as well, so who didn't have PBC, and they did MRIs of their muscle. And what they found is that higher levels of exercise, people with PBC built up lactic acid in their muscles more, and they took a longer time to clear that from their muscles after exercise. And that gave rise to fatigue, made it more challenging to kind of sustain exercise. And what they proposed was that it was linked to mitochondrial dysfunction. So mitochondria haven't come up, I don't think, yet today, but for those of you who aren't aware of mitochondria, we need them to stay alive. They're in every single cell. They're the little tiny power plants that live in our cells. And what they do is they turn oxygen into energy. And energy is called ATP, and that's what powers up our energy batteries of our body. So these are affected in PBC and in other conditions that also suffer from chronic fatigue. And what also affects mitochondria health and number is having smaller muscles, so something called sarcopenia, or muscles that don't function quite as well. Okay, so that's another important link to mitochondrial health. So let's do a question. So if you can grab your phones, just on a 0 to 10 scale, 0 being no fatigue and 10 being the worst fatigue you can imagine, if you can put a number in there as to where you guys are at. Yeah, so some pretty high numbers in there. 7s, 8s, 6s being the biggest number. 11, yeah. 100. Okay. I hear you guys. Yeah, you're not alone. Obviously, this is the symptom that one of the main symptoms. So let's talk a little bit about what we can do about fatigue. I'll go through 5 things. 1, you need to let your team know that you're having this symptom, okay? Because it's not always just related to fatigue. There's other things that we can look for. And this was a really nice mnemonic that's put forth by one of the docs in the UK, Dr. Jones. So things like itch, obviously we've heard that can affect your sleep. We can try and manage that better. Autoimmune conditions tend to run together. Thyroid disease, celiac disease, anemia, having low blood counts, all of those can contribute to fatigue, so we can look for those and treat those. If you have other medical conditions going on, as many people did in the survey, Let's get those under better control. So poor diabetes control, or if you've got poor heart failure or kidney failure control, those can make you fatigued. And then obviously if you have sleep disturbance like sleep apnea, that's something to look into as well. And then mood challenges can make you fatigued. So there's lots of other things that could be contributing that you need to let your medical team know about so they can look into it. Second big thing is pacing. And many of you have probably heard about the spoon theory. Who's heard about the spoon theory? Yeah. So you have a certain number of spoons of energy to start your day, and you need to figure out how you want to use those spoons. So do you want to give up a spoon washing dishes, or do you want to use that spoon instead for doing something that feeds your soul, like spending time with your family? So those are things that we need to think about when we have less energy. Planning activities in advance, incorporating rest breaks, and really breaking up larger tasks into smaller steps. But I think here the biggest one that I want to point out is just be kind to yourself and just know that this is something that many people are struggling with, and cut yourself some slack. This is tough to try and do everything that you can with the symptom of fatigue. Okay, number 3 is exercise. This is absolutely for PBC or not PBC. This is the magic pill that has not been bottled. And exercise has so many benefits on the heart, on the lungs, on the blood vessels. It also has benefits on bone and brain. It makes people less inclined to dementia, improves mood. On the muscle level, those mitochondria that I was telling you about, if you exercise, those mitochondria actually increase in number, but they also are happier. They're functioning better. Okay, so that's the key intervention that we can do non-pharmacologically to increase this. And this is a really nice study I'll just put up from the UK, which looked at exercise. It's a non-controlled study, so they didn't have a control group alongside the intervention group, but they had 31 individuals with PBC, quite a high level of fatigue, participate in 12 weeks of exercise, supervised by a physiotherapist, and they saw significant reductions in fatigue, improvements in brain function, and improvements in quality of life. Okay, number 4, breath work. So one of the lovely participants I've had a chance to work with said to me, yeah, I went to my doc and I said, they're teaching me how to do breath work in this program called Empower. And they're like, they're teaching you how to breathe. You know how to breathe. But I will say, yes, we're all breathing 20,000 times a day, but we're not consciously breathing. We're not thinking about how we're breathing most of the time. So breath work is actually using your breath in a conscious, controlled way to help your physical and emotional health. Okay, and this is quite powerful. So I'll say, you can think about this for yourself, but we want to try and get to optimal breathing. Up to 50% of people are mouth breathers. Optimal breathing is actually breathing through your nose. And there's multiple things for why that is. I'm happy to cover that later. 60 to 80% of the population are chest breathers. So not breathing deep into the belly, but actually breathing up into the chest. When you look at a baby, they're breathing in their bellies. That's how we start. That's how we need to kind of continue. But many habits that we have over our lives make us into chest breathers. So breathing low, through the nose, breathing low. And then the last one is breathing slow. So this is really interesting. If you look at medical textbooks from the early 1900s and look at what was normal, considered to be a breathing rate, it was about 10 to 14 breaths per minute. Then it went to 12 to 16 breaths per minute when many of us were in medical school and high school. And today it's up to about 12 to 20 breaths per minute. So as we are more, as a society, becoming kind of sympathetically overdriven and stressed, our normals are changing as far as what's actually normal, but it's actually much more normal to breathe slower. Okay. And there's many breathwork techniques, and this is kind of a course in itself. Tomorrow you will learn about a couple of these. And lastly, meditation. And I think this to me is like exercise is physical fitness. Meditation and breathwork are mental fitness, and we can't forget to exercise our minds as well. So meditation is something where there's lots of studies showing it increases attention, working memory, and actually how you can think more quickly as well. And I often hear, oh, I have way too many thoughts. I can't actually meditate. But it's that focus on your breath. Oh, I'm thinking about something else. Bringing yourself back to your breath or to whatever you're focusing on in your meditation. That is the training that you go through with meditation, and that's what improves your focus. So I would say everyone in the room can definitely start to do something like that. So let me bring you back to this more complicated slide just to show you that breathing, meditation, impact across multiple studies, all of those different things that I talked about, immune cells, cytokines, nerve function, so boosting vagal tone, and actually even the mitochondrial efficiency. Okay, so that's how we think that works. Now, we heard about drugs. I won't focus on drugs much, just one quick slide to say in 2019, when this review was done to say, what do drugs do for fatigue? And the answer was not much. Now I think the situation is changing and it's fantastic. We'll hear probably more about this as well, but that yes, the drugs, whether they work on itch or whether they work on other mechanisms, I think we're going to have some really promising effects there. Okay, with that, I'm going to invite Emily up, and she's just going to share a couple of slides about the Empower program. As she does that, just how many in the room have had a chance to participate in one or more of the Empower programs before? So a lot of you guys, thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. So many of you know about the Empower program, but I'll explain it just briefly for those of you who don't. So it's a large 3-arm trial. So what that meant was we had people who wanted to join the study, and then they were randomized to one of 3 arms. So that was either the waitlist control, where you waited 12 weeks and then you got the program, or you got the program as is, or there was an additional level of support in the 3rd arm with the program plus weekly one-to-one check-ins. And these were with myself or other members of our graduate research team. And the Empower program was a 12-week online mind-body wellness program. So we integrated many of the practices that Dr. Tandon mentioned already. So there was yoga, breathing, meditation, and then we also had some psychology skills, and these were all based in acceptance and commitment therapy. And it talked through things like pacing and values. And so you work through each week at your own pace with pre-recorded videos, so it could really be done on your own time. And they were all at different levels and different intensities. So it was really adaptable to what could fit for you. And so we had a total of 825 people take part in the overall trial, but I'm just going to be talking about our liver subgroup today, which was 255 people. So of the 255 with liver disease, the prominent group was PBC. So we had 184 with PBC, a subset with cirrhosis, and then we had 20 with primary sclerosing cholangitis as well. And similar to the PBC survey I talked about, our participants were predominantly female and reported being white/European, and our mean age was 58.6 years. And the majority of our participants did come from Canada as well as the US, but we did have a couple people from Europe. So we had people complete surveys at the beginning and then at the end of the study, and we used lots of different surveys. So we looked at mental health, we looked at fatigue, we looked at frailty, lots of different questions that we asked. But what we wanted to do was to look at just the baseline surveys and understand what kind of burden people are living with at the outset. And so this is a complex statistical model, but basically what we did was looked at how all of these surveys and symptoms related to one another. And so you can see there's kind of 3 main color-coded neighborhoods or clusters of symptoms. So the big symptom in blue is the mental health cluster. So you can see anxiety and depression fit into here. And then in the green cluster, this is the quality of life. So all the domains of quality of life, including mobility and pain. And then in yellow, this is fatigue and frailty. So they were kind of distinct and on their own and highly related to one another. And what was interesting and probably not surprising to any of you was that physical fatigue was the most interconnected symptom or the most central symptom. And what that tells us is that it was closely related to all the other symptoms. And if you could target physical fatigue, you could actually have a broader impact on the other symptoms included in this network. And as you can see, I've just included some numbers just describing kind of what people were living with at baseline. So a large proportion of our people actually met criteria to be frail at baseline. Fatigue was moderate to severe on average, and there was a high level of demoralization as well at baseline. And then we looked at our outcomes. So we looked at how these scores changed over time. And this is reporting on our fatigue outcomes specifically. So we used a tool called the Modified Fatigue Impact Scale. It's really handy because it has an overall score as well as domains. So you can look at physical, cognitive, and then psychosocial fatigue as well. And what we found is that those who had access to the Empower program had a significant reduction in their overall fatigue score, as well as their fatigue score in each of the subdomains. So really positive and impactful outcome. And these are just some quotes that kind of illustrate the overall experience in the program. So we interviewed about 100 people after they finished the program and asked about several things. And as you can see here, many people took different aspects from the program. So someone here is talking about pacing and the breath work and how they use that tool to combat the fatigue and to start coping with daily life. Other people talk about gaining energy and gaining higher quality energy as they went through the program. And then other people talked about the impact of fatigue and how they learned to kind of balance the fatigue with their values and what they value in everyday life. So those are our main points. I'll hand it back to Dr. Tandon.
Okay, so I'll end. Yeah. So fatigue is common. We need to think about alternate causes. I think the future's bright, and tomorrow you'll get a chance to practice. So thanks for listening, guys, and looking forward to questions.